Okay, let's start. Number 1. Pumapunku. You're kneeling on the Bolivian Altiplano at an elevation of 12,800 feet, and you're holding a piece of stone that weighs about as much as a dictionary. It fits in both hands. But the surface on the edge is so flat, so perfectly true, that when you press a steel machinist's rule against it, light disappears from beneath the blade. No gap, flatter than most machined metal surfaces in a modern workshop. You set it down and look up at the stone behind you. That one weighs 800 tons, and its surface is the same. Pumapunku is part of the Tiwanaku complex on the Bolivian Altiplano, dated by mainstream archaeology to approximately 500 to 600 CE. The site covers several acres and consists of massive stone blocks, scattered and toppled, apparently by an ancient earthquake or cataclysm. What they were before they fell is the problem. The blocks are cut from andesite and diorite. Diorite registers at 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Iron registers at 4. Copper, the hardest metal available to pre-Columbian Andean cultures, registers at 3. You cannot scratch diorite with copper. You certainly cannot grind it to the tolerances evident at Pumapunku, where surfaces are flat to within 1 millimeter and drill holes 6 millimeters in diameter run perfectly circular with walls smooth enough to reflect light. These blocks also interlock. The H-shaped stones slot together like components manufactured to specification, with no mortar, joining at angles that require the mating faces to be dimensionally identical. Not approximately identical. Identical. The nearest quarry for the red sandstone used at the site sits 10 miles away across flat terrain. The andesite, however, was quarried from a site 60 miles distant across the Andes at comparable altitude. The largest blocks weigh between 130 and 800 tons. The mainstream explanation is organized labor and incremental ingenuity. Skilled workers using stone and bone tools work the surfaces over long periods through abrasion, pecking, and grinding. The blocks were moved on earthen ramps and wooden sledges using hundreds of workers with rope. The apparent precision is a product of time and patience, not advanced technology. But materials science does not support the abrasion hypothesis for diorite at this finished quality. Geologist and engineer Arlen Andrews formally analyzed Pumapunku's surface treatments and concluded that no known pre-industrial technique produces a surface of comparable regularity in diorite at scale. The drill holes present the clearest problem. A 6 mm circular bore in diorite with a smooth interior wall and no spiral chatter marks. The artifact left by any spinning tool suggests a process that leaves no trace of the tool that made it. And the 60-mile transport of 800-ton stones across Andean terrain has no proposed mechanism that scales to the documented weights. Researchers, including David Hatcher Childress and Eric von Daniken, have argued that Pumapunku's construction fingerprint precision impossible with available materials, transport distances beyond known logistics, is consistent with intervention by a non-human intelligence. In the framework proposed by Zechariah Sitchin and others who work from Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki, the beings the oldest written civilization in history, described as arriving from the sky, were specifically the agents of this knowledge transfer. The Tiwanaku people themselves left no records describing the construction. When Spanish missionaries asked the local Aymara who built it, the answer was, the gods, before the sun existed. Who taught these people to work diorite to tolerances that require machine tools? What made the drill holes in the hardest stone on the Altiplano and left no evidence of its method? And where did that knowledge go when the builders did? Number 2. The Great Pyramid of Giza. You're British archaeologist William Flinders Petrie, and the year is 1880. You've spent months at Giza with the most precise surveying instruments available in the Victorian era, and you are trying to find the errors. Every great structure has errors. Measurement drift, settling, human mistake. You're looking for them in the Great Pyramid because their absence would mean something you're not quite prepared to accept. When you publish your survey in 1883, the errors you find are measured in millimeters across a base 230 meters wide. The errors do not accumulate. They average out. As if someone had a correction mechanism built in. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built approximately 4,500 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. It stands 138 meters tall today, originally 146 meters, before the outer casing was stripped for medieval Cairo's construction. It contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks averaging 2.5 tons each, with some granite blocks in the interior chambers reaching 80 tons. The granite was quarried at Aswan, 500 miles south. Petrie's survey found the base level to be flat to within 2.1 centimeters across 230 meters. The four corner angles average 89 degrees, 58 minutes, and 58 seconds, deviating from a perfect right angle by less than 1 minute of arc. The original casing stones, polished white limestone that once covered the exterior, were fitted to half-millimeter tolerances with joints of 0.02 millimeters. That is finer than a human hair. The pyramid is aligned to true north within 0.05 degrees of arc. The Paris Observatory, built in 1667, is less accurately aligned to north. The Great Pyramid predates it by 4,200 years. Here's where it stops being engineering and starts being something else. The perimeter of the base divided by twice the height produces 3.14159 pi, accurate to 4 decimal places. The ratio of the slant height to half the base produces 1.618, the golden ratio. Both constants embedded simultaneously, to 4 decimal places, in the same structure. The internal king's chamber maintains a constant temperature of exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of outside conditions. That is the mean temperature of the Earth's crust. The mainstream explanation is organized labor on an industrial scale. Egyptologist Mark Lehner's research at Giza documented a workers' village and administrative infrastructure, supporting a workforce of 20,000 to 30,000. Copper tools, wooden sledges, water lubrication, and earthen ramps explain the movement and placement. The mathematical constants are coincidence or post hoc projection. Ancient builders working in round numbers accidentally approximated pi and phi, but Petrie himself, no alternative historian, no sensationalist, stated the casing stone jointing was finer than the best modern masonry he had observed in his career. The probability of embedding both pi and phi to 4 decimal places in the same structure simultaneously through coincidence is not a distribution that statistical analysis supports. British astronomer Sir John Herschel commented on the alignment precision in 1840 and had no satisfactory mechanical explanation. And the temperature maintenance in the king's chamber has never been adequately explained as passive or coincidental. Researcher Robert Bauval identified in 1994 that the 3 main Giza pyramids mirror the angular offset of Orion's belt. The same star pattern appears encoded at Teotihuacan in Mexico and in the Nazca lines in Peru, 3 sites on different continents with no documented contact. If a single intelligence designed all 3, the purpose of that encoding still has no mainstream explanation. How were casing stones fitted to tolerances finer than a human hair without precision measurement instruments? What maintains the king's chamber at the Earth's mean temperature? And who or what encoded Orion at Giza and then encoded it again on the other side of the world? Number 3. Sacsayhuaman. Your Spanish conquistador Pedro de Chiesa de Leon, and the year is 1550. You've seen fortifications across Europe, the walls of Seville, the towers of Toledo, the ramparts of a dozen cities the Spanish army has besieged or held. You've written about all of them with professional precision. Now you're standing above Cusco looking at the walls of Sacsayhuaman, and you are writing in your journal that you cannot explain what is in front of you. No force of men, you write, could have moved them. You are a soldier. You have moved armies. You know what human effort looks like at its maximum. This is something else. Sacsayhuaman sits above the city of Cusco in the Peruvian Andes, the ancient capital of the Inca Empire. Its 3 tiers of zigzag walls rise from the hillside in a form that resembles lightning from above. Mainstream archaeology attributes its construction to the Inca under the 9th Sapa Inca Pachacuti in the 15th century CE. The Inca were sophisticated engineers and administrators. Their road network covered 40,000 kilometers. They built Machu Picchu. They are not the problem. The problem is the stones. The largest individual block measures approximately 8.5 meters tall and weighs an estimated 300 tons. Some weigh as much as 360 tons. They sit in courses that rise 9 meters, fitted together without mortar, in a polygonal masonry style that joins irregular shapes with up to 12 or more faces each, mating in 3 dimensions with no gaps. No 2 blocks are the same shape. Every block is unique. Every joint is tight. Running a knife blade between them is not possible. The largest mobile crane on Earth today maxes at approximately 1,200 tons under ideal conditions at essentially zero travel distance. Moving a 360-ton stone across several kilometers of Andean mountain terrain with slope, altitude, and irregular ground is a fundamentally different engineering problem. The Inca had no iron, no wheels documented in pre-Columbian Peru, and no draft animals larger than the llama, which carries a maximum of approximately 165 pounds. The mainstream explanation credits tens of thousands of workers, wooden rollers, earthen ramps, and rope systems, organized through the Inca state's administrative capacity. Archaeological evidence shows quarrying activity and transport paths near the site. Given enough time and enough people, any stone can be moved. But the Inca themselves did not claim to have built Sacsayhuaman. Their oral traditions attribute the polygonal megalithic work to a race called the Viracocha beings, described in Andean mythology as arriving from the sky in a time before the Inca existed. The 16th century Spanish chronicler Juan de Betanzos recorded Inca testimony that the Viracocha were the original builders of the Cyclopean stonework at Cusco. The Inca built their own architecture in regular, fine ashlar masonry. Machu Picchu is theirs. The polygonal giants at Sacsayhuaman belong to a different tradition, a different hand, and the Inca said so themselves. In the framework of researchers who cross-reference Andean traditions with Sumerian records, the Viracocha match the profile of the Anunnaki technologically advanced, physically large, arriving from above, and eventually departing. The Inca weren't the first civilization on this land. They inherited a foundation and knew it. Why would the Inca attribute their finest site to outsiders if they built it themselves? Who were the Viracocha, and where did they go? And what technology moved 360-ton stones across a mountain range and placed them in three-dimensional jigsaw joints that modern engineers have never been asked to replicate? Number 4. Göbekli Tepe. Your German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and a Kurdish shepherd has just led you to a hilltop in southeastern Turkey. The year is 1994. You've been told local farmers have been moving large flint nodules from this mound for years and dumping them to clear fields. Within 2 hours of beginning your first test trench, you understand those weren't flint nodules. They were the tops of T-shaped limestone pillars, 6 meters tall. You keep digging. By nightfall, you understand that you are standing on the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century, and that every textbook about the origins of human civilization will need to be rewritten. Göbekli Tepe is located in southeastern Turkey, near the modern city of Şanlıurfa. Carbon dating of organic material from the earliest construction layers places the site's origin at approximately 9,600 BCE, 11,600 years ago. To understand why that date is devastating, you need to understand what the standard archaeological model says about 9,600 BCE. It says, there was nothing. The conventional sequence of human development runs hunter-gatherers, then agriculture around 10,000 BCE, then surplus food, then permanent settlements, then monumental construction. Complex religious architecture at the scale of Göbekli Tepe should not exist until well after agriculture is established, but Göbekli Tepe is at least as old as the first evidence of agriculture, and probably older. The people who built it were, by definition, nomadic hunter-gatherers with no cities, no writing, no pottery, and no metal tools. They built 20 stone circles. The T-shaped pillars stand 3 to 6 meters tall and weigh between 10 and 20 tons each. They are covered in intricate bas-relief carvings of animals, foxes, boars, aurochs, cranes, scorpions, and elongated human-like figures with hands and arms. The circles are arranged concentrically, with the largest pillars at the center. Moving them from the on-site quarry, roughly 100 meters distant, without wheels or draft animals, required organized labor on a scale that contradicts the entire hunter-gatherer model of that era. Schmidt spent 20 years excavating the site before his death in 2014. He consistently maintained that Göbekli Tepe required a level of social organization not supposed to exist at its date. He stated publicly that the site reversed the known sequence that complex society may have preceded and produced agriculture, not the other way around, with Göbekli Tepe as the organizing center. In 2017, researcher Martin Sweatman of the University of Edinburgh, published an analysis in the journal Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry, identifying Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone, as a star map recording a comet. Impact at approximately 10,950 BCE. That date corresponds to the beginning of the Younger Dryas Cold Period, a sudden climate catastrophe now believed by several geologists to have been triggered by a cosmic impact. Göbekli Tepe may be the oldest disaster memorial on Earth, but the detail that refuses to leave you is not the age or the carvings. It is that around 8000 BCE, someone deliberately and carefully buried the entire site. Tens of thousands of tons of sand and rubble were packed over the stone circles. The circles were preserved, hidden with intention. Whoever buried it did not destroy it. They were keeping it. Only 5% of the site has been excavated. Who organized hunter-gatherers to move 20-ton pillars before agriculture existed? Who taught them to carve star maps in limestone? And who buried an 11,600-year-old ceremonial complex so carefully that it survived intact until a shepherd walked over it in 1994? Number 5. Baalbek. You're a Roman military engineer in 15 BCE, and your orders are to build the greatest temple complex in the Eastern Empire in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon. You arrive at the site already prepared. What you find there will not appear in any official report you file, because there is no category in Roman engineering for what you are looking at. 3 stones sit in the western foundation wall. Each one is 19 meters long, 4 meters tall, and 3.6 meters wide. Each weighs between 800 and 900 tons. They sit 8 meters above the ground, placed with a precision you cannot match with your cranes. You don't know who put them there. You build around them and above them, and your Temple of Jupiter, the largest religious structure in the Roman Empire, rests on a foundation you did not make. Baalbek, ancient Heliopolis, sits in the Bekaa Valley of modern Lebanon. The Roman temple complex, constructed from the 1st century BCE onward, is among the finest surviving examples of Roman architecture. But embedded in its western podium wall are 3 stones known as the trilithon, a Greek word meaning simply 3 stones that predate the Roman construction by an unknown span, and whose origin no Roman text records. Each trilithon stone is approximately 19 meters long, 4.3 meters tall, and 3.6 meters wide, weighing between 800 and 1,000 tons. They are placed in a single course at a height of 8 meters above current ground level, fitted together with tolerances of less than a centimeter. The Romans built their temple above and around them, meaning Roman engineers arrived, found these 3 stones already in place, and incorporated them into their design. They were using a pre-existing foundation they could not explain and could not have built. The maximum rated capacity of a Roman crane, the polyspastos, as described by the architect and engineer Vitruvius, was approximately 3 to 6 tons under optimal conditions. The largest object the Roman Empire is documented to have moved was a 507-ton obelisk transported from Egypt to Rome by Emperor Caligula in 37 CE, an operation requiring a specialized barge, hundreds of workers, and months of engineering preparation. It remains the Roman record. The trilithon stones are nearly twice as heavy, and they were placed 8 meters in the air. In 2014, a team from the German Archaeological Institute in Beirut discovered a 4th megalith in the nearby quarry. It has never been moved. It weighs approximately 1,650 tons, the largest shaped stone on Earth. It lies in the quarry at a slight angle, half extracted, as if abandoned mid-operation. Something stopped whoever was working on it. The mainstream explanation holds that Phoenician builders placed the trilithon using earthen ramps and large labor forces, and that the Romans found them useful as a foundation. The 1,650-ton stone was abandoned when the civilization or project that required it collapsed. But the ancient name for this site is instructive. Baalbek means city of Baal. Baal appears in Canaanite, Phoenician, and Sumerian texts, and across all of them, he is a sky deity who descended in a craft, resided at elevated platforms, and communicated from above. The Sumerian counterpart, the Anunnaki deity, known as Enlil, is described in identical terms: a lord who requires a high dwelling place, a stepped platform, and an approach from the sky. The trilithon stones, placed 8 meters high with no explanation, are described in ancient Phoenician tradition as the seat of Baal, Not a place built for human worship, a place built for an occupant. Who placed 800-ton stones at elevation before Rome's engineers arrived? What did the ancient world know about Baal that required this specific type of structure? And why does a 1,650-ton stone, the largest shaped rock on Earth, still lie unfinished in a quarry outside a city named for a being the ancient world described as coming from the sky? Number 6. Teotihuacan. You're a construction worker in 1906, and the Mexican government has tasked your crew with demolishing a deteriorated building inside the Teotihuacan archaeological zone, 30 miles northeast of Mexico City. When the floor comes up, there are 2 layers of mica beneath it, sheets of the mineral perfectly positioned across an area of approximately 90 feet square, 2 inches thick, sandwiched between stone. Mica isn't local. The nearest source is Brazil, 3,000 miles south. You mention it in the site report and the sheets are removed without documentation and sold. It will take decades before anyone grasps what was lost or asks the question that matters. Why did someone import a radioactively inert electrical insulator from Brazil and seal it in the floor of a building with no decoration, no iconography, and no obvious purpose? Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities on Earth from approximately 100 to 650 CE, with a population estimated at 200,000. Its 3 main pyramids are arranged along a central axis. When the angular offset of the 3 main structures is compared to the 3 stars of Orion's belt, the match is nearly exact, the same correlation that exists at Giza's 3 pyramids. 2 sites on opposite sides of the world, built centuries apart, encoding the same star configuration into their architecture. But the mica is harder to explain than geometry. Mica is a layered silicate mineral with 2 properties of direct industrial relevance. It is electrically non-conductive, the preferred insulating material in capacitors, particle accelerators, and electrical equipment, and it blocks radiation, nuclear, infrared, and ultraviolet. No Mesoamerican culture has a documented ceremonial, artistic, or ritual use for mica. It is not used as pigment, decoration, or offering anywhere else in the pre-Columbian archaeological record. Its properties are industrial. And someone imported it from 3,000 miles away and buried it in the floor. In 2003, Mexican archaeologist Sergio Gomez of the National Institute of Anthropology and History discovered a previously unknown tunnel beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. His team excavated for 12 years. In 2015, they reached 3 chambers at the tunnel's end. In those chambers, an estimated 50 liters of liquid mercury. Mercury requires advanced metallurgical extraction from cinnabar ore, a process that produces toxic vapor and demands specialized knowledge. No pre-Columbian culture is documented using mercury in comparable quantities for any purpose. 50 liters of liquid mercury, 2,000 years old, beneath a pyramid. No one knows why. The mainstream explanation is ritual. Mica as a luxury import for sacred floors. Mercury as a symbolic mirror, a reflective underworld river in a burial complex. The chambers may represent a cosmological landscape, not a functional installation, but there are no offerings in those chambers. No human remains, no pottery, no iconography. An empty room with liquid mercury in it, sealed beneath a pyramid for 2,000 years. If it is ritual with the material properties of a technical installation. Researcher Robert Temple and others have proposed that mercury pools at depth, combined with the acoustic properties of pyramid chambers, could function as resonant amplification systems. Others point to mercury's unique reflective properties for astronomical observation. Neither explanation has been confirmed, none has been ruled out. What were the mica floors shielding from, or shielding against? What did 50 liters of mercury do in a sealed chamber beneath a pyramid? And who decided to build the same Orion configuration at Teotihuacan that someone had already built at Giza, 7,000 miles away? Number 7. The Nazca Lines. You're Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia XSB, and the year is 1927. You're flying over the coastal desert of southern Peru in a small aircraft, and below you the desert floor is covered in drawings. An enormous hummingbird, 96 meters across, its wings spread in perfect symmetry. A spider, 46 meters wide. A condor with a wingspan of 130 meters, its neck angled in a way that only reads correctly from above. Straight lines running dead flat for miles across terrain that rises and dips as all desert terrain does. From the ground, none of this exists. From 1,500 feet, it is a gallery. These drawings have been here for 2,000 years, and until this moment, no human being has been in a position to see them as they were designed to be seen. The Nazca lines are located in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru, created by the Nazca culture between approximately 500 BCE and 500 CE. The creation method has been documented. The red iron oxide surface is composed of pebbles that reveal a lighter layer beneath when removed. The figures were made by piling those pebbles at the edges of cleared paths. In principle, it requires no advanced technology. What it requires is a design process that functions from altitude. There are 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 biomorphs, animals and plants drawn to scales that only produce a unified image from the air. The straight lines run for miles and maintain flatness to within millimeters over their full length, crossing hillocks and ravines as if the terrain were irrelevant. The longest runs 12 kilometers with a total deviation of less than 9 meters. Roman road engineers, among the finest straight-line builders in history, regularly deviated by more on shorter distances. Swiss aeronautical engineer Henri Stierlin published an analysis in 1983 comparing the dimensional profiles of the longest Nazca straight lines against International Civil Aviation Organization standards for aircraft. Runways. The width ranges, load-bearing surface composition, and length profiles were consistent with ICAO specifications for light aircraft. Stierlin was careful to note he was reporting a technical observation, not claiming alien landings. Researcher Phyllis Pitluga of the Adler Planetarium in Chicago published a computer-assisted analysis in 1990, finding that the spider figure maps the constellation Orion and the monkey figure maps Ursa Major. Orion appears encoded at Giza, it appears encoded at Teotihuacan, and now it appears again in the Peruvian desert, drawn at a scale only visible from altitude by a culture with no documented means of flight. The mainstream explanation is astronomical calendar and ritual. German mathematician Maria Reich spent 50 years on the lines and argued they function as seasonal markers and astronomical calendars, with figures pointing toward horizon positions of celestial bodies at specific times of year. Lines were walked ceremonially. Scale served religious purpose. But ritual walking does not explain the aerial perspective. You do not create a 130-meter condor as a path you walk at ground level. The proportions produce nothing a human eye can resolve. The condor only exists from above. The figures were designed for a viewpoint that the Nazca people did not possess. Someone built a message that can only be read from the sky. A specific audience was expected to read it. Why design figures that are invisible to the people who made them? Why encode Orion in desert geoglyphs on the same continent where Orion is encoded at the pyramid city of Teotihuacan? And who was the intended audience for a message that requires flight to receive? Number 8. Easter Island. Your Dutch navigator, Jacob Roggeveen, and the date is Easter Sunday, 1722. You're the first European to reach this island, a volcanic speck, 63 square miles wide, sitting 3,700 kilometers from the Chilean coast and 2,000 kilometers from the nearest inhabited land. The people here have outrigger canoes. They cannot have sailed here from anywhere in living memory on what they currently possess. And yet they are here, and they have been here long enough to quarry, carve, transport, and erect 887 stone statues, the smallest of which stands taller than most of your crew, on an island with no large trees and no draft animals. Easter Island, called Rapa Nui by its inhabitants, was settled by Polynesian voyagers somewhere between 300 and 800 CE. The statues they carved are called moai. They were cut from volcanic tuff at the Rano Raraku quarry and transported to stone platforms called ahu around the island's coastline. The average moai stands 4 meters tall and weighs 13 tons. The largest ever completed and erected, called Pero, stands nearly 10 meters and weighs 82 tons. It was transported 6 kilometers from the quarry to its platform on the north coast. In 2011, archaeologists Carl Lipo of Binghamton University and Terry Hunt of the University of Hawaii demonstrated with a 5-ton replica that moai could be walked upright using 3 rope teams in a lateral rocking motion, covering 100 meters in under an hour. The experiment was published in the Journal of Archaeological Science. The Rapa Nui oral tradition that the statues walked is, for moai of average size, physically accurate. The walking method is not the mystery. The mystery is the one that never moved. At the quarry, half buried in the volcanic hillside, lies a moai called El Gigante. It is 21 meters long and weighs an estimated 270 tons. It has never been freed from the rock. It would have been the largest moai ever erected. The lateral oscillation method that works for 13 tons on 3 ropes does not scale to 270 tons. The force required to initiate oscillation in a 270-ton mass on a flat surface exceeds the combined pull of every person on the island at its estimated peak population of 15,000. El Gigante was carved and then abandoned. Something was expected to move it. That something never came. The mainstream explanation is that the Rapa Nui civilization eventually collapsed under the ecological strain of deforestation. Trees were felled to make transport rollers and construction materials until the island was stripped bare, leading to soil erosion, agricultural failure, and demographic catastrophe. The construction program destroyed the civilization that built it. But El Gigante was not left unfinished because the trees ran out. It was carved. Someone stood at that quarry face and committed to producing a 270-ton statue, which means someone believed, at the moment of the decision, that a method of moving it was available or would become available. That confidence implies a technology that did not survive, or a technology that departed before the work was finished. The civilization that built the statues was destroyed by building the statues. The 270-ton statue was never built at all. Between those two facts is a gap that the walking method, the ropes, and the wooden rollers do not close. What technology was planned for El Gigante that was no longer accessible when the carving was complete? Where did the original knowledge, the design tradition, the construction impulse come from on an island with no outside contact? And why does the same compulsion to raise enormous stone faces on elevated platforms appear on multiple continents, in cultures with no documented connection to each other? Number 9. The Yonaguni Monument. Your dive instructor Kihachiro Aratake, and the year is 1987. You guide sport divers off the coast of Yonaguni Island, Japan's westernmost point in the Ryukyu chain, 100 kilometers east of Taiwan. You know this water. You've been in it hundreds of times. Today you've drifted slightly off your usual route, following a current, and you are 25 meters beneath the surface, staring at something that has no business being on any dive survey you've ever seen. Flat stone terraces dropping in precise uniform steps, right-angle corners, parallel walls running in geometrically consistent lines for tens of meters, a carved arch, a stone road running along the perimeter. You surface and write it down. It will take another 15 years before the world can agree on what you found. The Yonaguni Monument was reported to the scientific community following Aratake's discovery and consists of a series of flat terraces, stepped platforms, angular walls, and apparently carved features an arch, twin pillars, and geometric reliefs. The main terrace is approximately 50 meters wide, 150 meters long, and 27 meters tall. The steps are each roughly 1 meter high and 1 meter deep, with those consistent dimensions repeated across the entire formation. The depth gives the date. Sea levels in the western Pacific were approximately 25 meters lower during the last glacial maximum. The last time this area was above sea level was between 10,000 and 12,000 BCE. Sumer, the oldest accepted civilization on Earth, begins at approximately 4,500 BCE. If the Yonaguni Monument is artificial, it predates the first civilization by at least 5,500 years. Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus spent 15 years conducting regular dives at the site. He concluded the monument is artificial or substantially modified from a natural formation, publishing his findings in academic papers and presenting to international geological conferences. He documented what he interpreted as tool marks, carved faces, and geometric features inconsistent with natural sandstone formation in the region. Robert Schoch, the Boston University geologist who famously redated the Sphinx at Giza to at least 7,000 BCE based on water erosion patterns, approached Yonaguni with professional skepticism. After multiple dive visits in the 1990s, his position shifted. He concluded in published analysis that while the base formation is likely a natural sandstone tableland, shaped partly by seismic activity, Yonaguni sits on an active fault. Certain angular features and consistent geometric proportions are not characteristic of natural erosion. Natural sandstone fractures along bedding planes and joints. It does not produce repeated right angles, uniform step dimensions, and parallel walls running perpendicular to each other at consistent intervals across a 150-meter structure. The mainstream explanation holds that tectonic stress and directional ocean currents produce the angular geometry, that natural sandstone sometimes fractures in approximately regular ways, and that human pattern recognition instinctively finds architecture in organized geological forms. But Schoch's conversion was reluctant and professional. He had specific reputational reasons to remain skeptical of another anomalous ancient site, and he concluded partial artificiality anyway. The same Orion pattern encoded at Giza, at Teotihuacan, and in the Nazca Desert appears in traditional astronomy records from Okinawa, but that connection remains disputed. What is not disputed is the date the water rose and what the water covered. If a civilization sophisticated enough to cut stone terraces existed at 10,000 BCE and was later lost, what erased it? How many more structures from that era are sitting on continental shelves around the world, 25 meters below the waterline that rose when the last ice age ended? And what were they building before the flood came? Number 10. The Sumerian Ziggurats and the Anunnaki. You're in the British Museum in London, and it is 1850. Around you are tens of thousands of clay tablets recently excavated from the ruins of Nineveh in modern Iraq, a collection that will eventually reach 30,000 pieces. These are the oldest written records in human history, produced by the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia, the civilization that gave the world writing, the wheel, codified law, astronomy, mathematics, and the 60-minute hour. You pick up one tablet and begin reading. It is not a trade record or a legal contract. It is a detailed account of beings called the Anunnaki, a Sumerian term meaning those who from heaven came to earth. They arrived in craft of fire. They were physically large. They established the first cities. They gave humans knowledge of agriculture, metallurgy, and construction. And the structures built for their use, stepped stone pyramids, rising over the Mesopotamian plain, were not temples for human worship. They were residences, elevated landing platforms, places where the sky met the ground. Sumer emerged in southern Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, around 4,500 BCE. The ziggurats stepped pyramidal structures were built across the region, at a minimum of 32 confirmed sites. The oldest example is at Eridu, the city the Sumerians themselves identified as the first city ever built, with construction layers dating to approximately 5,000 BCE. Each ziggurat followed the same design, a massive rectangular base of mud brick supporting successive recessed platforms tapering to a small high chamber at the summit, called the Ekur, a Sumerian term meaning mountain house or high place. Sumerian texts describe the Ekur not as a place of human prayer but as the dwelling of a specific Anunnaki figure, inaccessible to ordinary humans, maintained by a priestly caste whose function was administrative, keeping the residence prepared for its occupant. Zechariah Sitchin was a scholar of ancient languages, born in Baku in 1920, educated at the London School of Economics, fluent in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Sumerian cuneiform. He spent 30 years translating Sumerian texts before publishing The 12th Planet in 1976. His argument was precise. The Anunnaki descriptions across thousands of Sumerian, Babylonian, and Akkadian tablets are not metaphorical. They are technical. The texts describe the Anunnaki's physical appearance, their modes of travel, their organizational hierarchy, their genetic modification of pre-existing hominids to create a labor workforce, and their eventual departure. These accounts predate the biblical Genesis by 1,500 years, and share with it an extensive list of structural parallels: the garden, the flood, the creation of man from clay. The Sumerian flood narrative, the Atrahasis epic, inscribed on British Museum tablet BM 78941 and dated to approximately 1700 BCE, describes the Anunnaki deliberating over whether to allow humanity to survive a coming flood, then choosing to warn one individual. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, predating the biblical Noah account by at least 900 years, contains the same event and the same beings. The oldest civilization in the world's oldest writing system recorded this story before anyone wrote the Bible. The mainstream academic response is pointed. Professional Assyriologists have identified specific translation errors in Sitchin's work and argue that the Anunnaki are standard Mesopotamian sky deities, mythological in the conventional sense. Their descriptions, according to this view, are poetic and symbolic, not technical reports. But mythology tends toward abstraction. It tends toward divine light and transcendence and metaphor. It does not typically specify the height of a god in cubits. It does not describe the orbital period of a god's homeworld. It does not record an engineering specification for the structure where a god is to be housed. The Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki do all three. If they are mythology written in the grammar of a technical manual. 10 structures on 5 continents, built across 12,000 years. Machine tolerances in diorite. Stones weighing hundreds of tons placed at elevation with no documented mechanism. Radiation-blocking minerals imported from 3,000 miles. Astronomical messages readable only from the sky. A ceremonial complex predating civilization, deliberately buried by someone who wanted it preserved. And the oldest written record in human history, left by the civilization that invented writing, says clearly, "We did not build this alone. Beings came from above. They built the high places. They gave us what we know, and then they left." The same story, on every continent, in every ancient language, from every culture that kept records. If something in this video didn't fit the version of history you were taught, subscribe, there is more of the buried record to come. Leave a like if a piece of evidence landed for you. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this question belongs to everyone.